The bank robber pressed a gun against my temple and dragged me toward the getaway car. "Police move one step closer, the old man dies first," he shouted. I didn't resist. To him, I was just the safest hostage in the room, gray hair, stiff knee, plain shirt. What he didn't know was that 30 years ago, men in far more dangerous places had called me by another name. And hours later, inside their hideout, when he searched my wallet and found one small, worn coin, his confidence vanished. "Who the hell are you?" he whispered. I looked at him and smiled. "Thank you for being here. It means everything." Quick question. Before we dive in, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country below. Let's see how far this Revenge Dad community reaches. This story contains some fictional elements crafted for entertainment and deeper meaning. Names and settings are not drawn from any specific person or place, but what this story says about family, trust, and justice is absolutely worth your time. My name is Silas Rourke. I am 67 years old, a widower for 9 years. And if you asked anyone on my block in Glendale about me, they would tell you I am nothing more than a retired industrial mechanic who drives a Ford pickup, older than most marriages, and spends his afternoons fixing things that probably should have been thrown away a decade ago. I like it that way. Thursday, August 28th started the same way it had started on the last Thursday of every month for the past 9 years. I put on a plain blue shirt, poured my coffee into a travel mug, and drove 12 minutes down Glen Oaks Boulevard to First Valley Bank. Helen started that routine. She believed in paper statements and sitting across a real desk from a real person, in knowing exactly where every dollar was going. When she passed, I kept the habit. It was one of the few things I could do that still felt like she was standing next to me. Martha Quinn. The branch manager spotted me the moment I pushed through the glass door. She was 55 years old and had worked at that branch for 23 years, and she greeted me the way a good neighbor greets you with genuine warmth and zero pretense. "Right on schedule," she said, her pen already pointing toward the customer service window. "Last Thursday of the month, and Silas Rourke walks through that door. I could set my watch by you. If I ever stop showing up," I told her, pulling off my jacket and draping it over my arm, "send someone to check on me." She laughed the way she always laughed, short, bright, real. "I'll bring coffee cake." I signed in at the front counter, collected my safe deposit box form, and made my way through the familiar routine. The bank was moderately busy for a weekday morning. A young mother sat near the window, with a boy of maybe 5 or 6, the child restless tugging at her sleeve, whispering something urgent about a toy he wanted. A heavy-set man, in a contractor's jacket, stood at the teller line, shifting his weight from foot to foot, clearly somewhere else to be. 2 elderly women sat in the waiting area, comparing notes on something in a magazine, their voices low and pleasant. I was standing at the side counter signing a fund transfer form when the front doors exploded open. Not slowly, not with warning. 3 men in black ski masks moved through that entrance like they had rehearsed it 1,000 times, which they probably had. The first man fired one round directly into the ceiling. The sound inside that tiled lobby was not a pop or a crack. It was a concussion, something physical that hit your chest and compressed your lungs from the inside. Several people screamed. The young mother yanked her son against her body and dropped behind the nearest chair, her arms wrapped around him so tight her knuckles went white. The 2 elderly women grabbed each other's hands, both of them shaking visibly, one pressing her free hand flat against her sternum like she was trying to hold her heart in place. "Nobody moves." The voice belonged to the man in front. He was the one I would come to know as Ray Castillo, though I did not know his name yet. What I knew in those first 4 seconds was what I always assessed first height: build dominant hand weapon type, spacing between the 3 of them. 2 handguns. 1 short-barreled rifle slung across Castillo's chest. They spread out instinctively, one to the left to cover the teller windows, one to the right to block the secondary exit, and Castillo in the center where he could see everything. Good tactical spacing. These were not amateurs. I set my pen down carefully and raised both hands, lowering myself to one knee with the others. My right knee sent a sharp complaint up through my hip. It always did in the cold, and the bank's air conditioning was aggressive. I kept my face neutral and my breathing slow. The security guard near the far wall made the mistake of reaching toward his holster. Castillo's man on the left covered the distance in 3 strides and put him on the floor with a single hard strike to the back of the knee. The guard went down hard, his head bouncing once against the tile. He did not get up. I cataloged the exit points. front glass doors covered, side corridor to the safe deposit room currently unmonitored, emergency side exit behind the teller counter, alarmed, which meant useless for a quiet escape, but potentially valuable for chaos if needed. I was not planning an escape yet. There were 11 civilians visible in that lobby, including the boy who was now crying softly into his mother's shoulder, his small body trembling like a leaf in high wind. The wrong move at the wrong moment in a room this size, with this many people between me and 3 armed men, would not make me a hero. It would make me the reason someone's child did not go home that night. So I stayed down. Castillo directed his men with short, precise hand signals. One vaulted the teller counter. Castillo himself moved to the center of the lobby floor, scanning faces, measuring people, doing what trained men do, sorting threats from non-threats. His eyes moved across the contractor in the work jacket, too big, too unpredictable. They moved to a young woman in a blazer near the window, too close to the exit. They moved to me, 67 years old, blue shirt, one knee on the floor, one hand braced against the counter to keep my balance. An old man whose joints were already complaining about the tile. In his eyes, I was the safest choice in the room. He crossed the floor in 8 steps. His hand closed around the collar of my shirt and hauled me upward with the kind of force that told me he was stronger than he looked and had done something like this before. My coffee mug hit the floor and skidded under the counter. The cold barrel of his handgun pressed against my right temple, and I heard Martha make a sound that was not quite a scream, more like the beginning of one that she swallowed before it could escape. "He has nothing to do with this," she called out, her voice cracking at the edges, her hands flying up in front of her chest. "Please, he is just a regular customer. He comes in every month. He is not—" "Ma'am." Castillo's voice was controlled, flat, the voice of a man used to cutting through noise. "Step back." Martha's chin was trembling. Her eyes were bright with the particular kind of terror that comes not from danger to yourself, but from watching danger happen to someone you care about. She stepped back because she had no other option. Her hand still raised, her chest heaving with shallow, rapid breaths. Castillo pressed the barrel harder against my temple and turned me toward the door. "Cops take 1 step inside," he announced to the room, loud enough to carry, and the old man is the first thing that happens. Outside, I could already hear the first siren. Someone had tripped the silent alarm. The police response time in this part of Glendale averaged between 4 and 6 minutes. They were already inside that window. Castillo shoved me toward the exit. I moved with him, not against him. I had 2 clear opportunities to break his grip in those first 12 feet, once when his weight shifted to his left side as he checked the parking lot through the glass, and once when his attention split toward his man on the teller counter. Both times I let the moment pass. Behind us, the boy had stopped crying. I did not look back. I did not need to. I had already counted 3 gunmen, noted the getaway car idling in the red zone, directly outside a dark blue Honda Pilot with a cracked rear taillight, and registered that the driver had not yet gotten out, which meant he was either very disciplined or very frightened. The door swung open. The August heat hit me like a wall after the air conditioning. This was not where my story ended. I knew that with a certainty that had nothing to do with optimism and everything to do with 30 years of experience I had spent the last 9 years pretending I no longer had. But as Castillo dragged me toward that car, one thought moved through my chest like a slow, familiar current, something I had not felt in a very long time, something that felt exactly like being awake again. But I am getting ahead of myself. To understand why a routine Thursday morning at a neighborhood bank became the worst and most important day of the last 9 years of my life, you need to go back to the night before, Wednesday, August 27th, 18 hours earlier. I drove out to Pasadena just before 8 o'clock that evening to return a toolbox Preston had borrowed the previous week. A decent set of socket wrenches, nothing I needed back urgently, but Preston had mentioned wanting to look at something under the hood of Claire's car, and a week felt long enough. I would drop it off, maybe stay for a cup of coffee if Claire offered, and be back home before the news. That was the plan. Claire and Preston lived in a pale yellow craftsman house on a quiet street just north of the Arroyo, the kind of neighborhood where people walked their dogs after dinner and waved at each other from their driveways. The kind of neighborhood that felt safe on the surface, which is exactly where I always looked, first beneath the surface. I pulled into the driveway at 8:15 and noticed the garage door was open about a foot, which was unusual. Preston was meticulous about the garage. He was meticulous about everything: the crease in his trousers, the part in his hair, the way he always positioned himself at the head of the table, at family dinners, as if someone had assigned him the seat. I had never liked that about him. I had never said so out loud because Claire loved him, and Claire's happiness had always mattered more to me than my own instincts. That was my mistake, and I had been carrying it for 6 years. He had always called me Papa Helen's word, the old-fashioned kind, the one her own grandfather had used. I had believed the gesture was genuine. I had thought it was one of the finest things I had ever seen a son-in-law do. I had been wrong, not about the gesture itself, but about the man who made it, which is a particular kind of wrong that takes longer to name, and longer still to forgive yourself for not seeing sooner. I lifted the garage door the rest of the way and stepped inside, holding the toolbox under my arm. The kitchen light was on at the far end of the house. I was about to call out Claire's name when I heard Preston's voice coming from the room at the end of the hall, his home office, the door half open, a thin bar of yellow light falling across the hallway floor. He was speaking to someone, another man. The voice I did not recognize. I am not a man who eavesdrops. I was not raised that way, and I did not spend 30 years in work that required discretion, only to throw it away in my daughter's hallway. But something in Preston's tone made my feet stop moving. Not the words, not yet. The tone. Flat. Careful. The kind of careful that people use when they are saying things they do not want repeated. I set the toolbox down against the wall without a sound and took 3 steps closer. "The money has to disappear before Friday," Preston said. The other man responded, his voice lower and rougher. "You've already pushed too much through those accounts. If they audit deeper, they'll find Claire's name on the filings." My chest tightened like someone had reached in and made a fist around my ribs. Preston's response came without hesitation. "Claire doesn't know anything about it. She doesn't have to know," the other man said. "Her signature is on the documents, digital authorization. If this unravels, she's the one holding the paper." "It won't unravel," Preston said. The certainty in his voice made my jaw tighten. "Not if you do your part before the weekend." A pause. Then the other man again, quieter this time, with an edge that was almost amused. "What about her father? I heard the old man has been asking questions." Preston made a sound that was somewhere between a dismissal and a laugh. "Silas is a retired machine mechanic. I can handle him." I pressed my back against the hallway wall, my pulse steady, but I noticed my hands had closed into fists around the strap of nothing, because I had already set the toolbox down. I forced them open, breathed through my nose. Through the gap in the door, I could see enough. Preston stood beside his desk in a charcoal dress shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow. Across from him stood a man I had never seen before, approximately 40 years old. Dark jacket, the kind of physical stillness that comes from either extreme confidence or extended discipline. On the inside of his left wrist, visible when he shifted his weight, was a tattoo, a single dark line looping completely around the wrist like a bracelet drawn in ink. On the desk between them sat a manila folder, several bank statements, and a document with Claire's name printed clearly across the top. I had seen enough. I needed to see more. Then the wind pushed the garage door behind me, and the hinges let out a slow, grinding creak that sounded in that quiet house like a gunshot. From upstairs, Claire's voice floated down warm and unsuspecting. "Dad, is that you?" The room at the end of the hall went absolutely quiet. I heard Preston's chair scrape against the hardwood. "Claire," Preston called out, smooth as polished stone. "What did you say, sweetheart?" I thought I heard Dad come in. Her voice was moving now toward the top of the stairs. I picked up the toolbox. I moved back through the garage the way I had come, keeping my steps even and quiet, and I got into my truck and drove away before Preston reached the garage door. In my rearview mirror, I watched him step out into the driveway and stand there in the yellow porch light, looking out at the street. He stood very still. The expression on his face was not worry, it was calculation. He had one question now. He was trying to figure out how much I had heard. I drove the 12 minutes home without turning on the radio. When I got inside, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and wrote down everything, every word, every detail, the tattoo on the man's wrist, the name on the folder, the bank statements. I wrote it all down before any of it could soften at the edges, the way memory does when you let it sit too long. Then I thought about calling Claire. My hand actually moved toward the phone. My thumb hovered over her name in my contacts, and her face appeared in my mind, 35 years old. sharp eyes that she got from her mother, and a stubbornness that she got from me, laughing at something on her back porch last Easter, completely unaware that the man sitting next to her was doing something that could destroy her life. I put the phone down. If I called her that night, Preston would know within the hour. He would see it in her face, hear it in her voice. He was the kind of man who watched people closely, who read small signals the way other people read headlines. And if he knew I had heard him, he would move, fast, before I understood what I was actually dealing with. I needed to know the full picture before I touched a single piece of it. So I did what I had trained myself to do in another life, in another version of myself, that I had spent 9 years burying under tool catalogs and pension statements, and the comfortable routine of a man with nothing left to prove. I waited. I observed. I let the night pass. What I did not know, what I could not have known, sitting at that kitchen table at 10:30 on a Wednesday night, was that by 9:47, the following morning waiting would no longer be an option. The Honda Pilot smelled like fast food and cigarettes, and something sharper underneath both of those, motor oil maybe, or the particular kind of anxiety that soaks into upholstery when men are running from something and trying not to show it. I was in the back seat between two of Castillo's men. My wrists were bound in front of me with a plastic zip tie, the heavy-duty kind, 3/8 of an inch wide, the type sold at hardware stores in bulk packs. I noted the tension, the angle of the locking mechanism, and the fact that my captors had bound my hands in front rather than behind, which told me they were thinking about convenience more than security. A mistake. Not one I intended to exploit immediately, but a mistake I filed away the way I used to file away everything, quietly, precisely, without any outward sign that I had noticed anything at all. Castillo rode in the passenger seat. He had pulled off his ski mask and tossed it into the footwell. He was younger than I expected, early 30s, dark hair, cut close on the sides, a jaw that carried tension, the way load-bearing walls carry weight. His eyes moved constantly, checking mirrors, scanning side streets, running through calculations I recognized because I had run the same ones myself in a different life. We drove for exactly 14 minutes before the car slowed and turned into a gravel lot behind a tire shop on the edge of Burbank. A second vehicle was waiting, a gray Chevy Tahoe with tinted windows and California plates I memorized in the 3 seconds it took Castillo's man to open the door and pull me out by the arm. I stumbled deliberately. My right knee buckled slightly on the gravel. Not performance, the knee genuinely hurt. It always hurt after kneeling on tile, and one of the men grabbed my elbow to keep me upright. I thanked him. He looked at me like I had said something in a foreign language. They transferred me to the Tahoe in under 90 seconds. Professional timing. The Honda Pilot pulled away before our doors were fully closed. Inside the Tahoe I counted. 2 men in front, 1 beside me in the back. Castillo directly behind the driver, turned sideways so he could keep eyes on me. 4 total plus whoever was waiting at the destination. I watched the streets, Glen Oaks to San Fernando Road, then south toward the river, industrial corridor. The air changed when we crossed into the Vernon area, a particular combination of rendering plants and chemical facilities that sat heavy in the lungs and left a taste at the back of the throat that no amount of water quite washed away. I had driven through Vernon enough times to recognize it without seeing a single street sign. The man to my left, heavy-set early 40s, a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, reached over and unzipped the front pocket of my jacket. He pulled out my wallet with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done it many times before. He flipped it open, found my driver's license, and read my name aloud the way people read names they are not sure how to pronounce. Silas Rourke. Castillo turned his head. The man with the scar held the license up. Says here, Glendale address. I can read, Castillo said. He reached back and took the license himself, studying it for a moment. Then he took out his phone and typed my name into a search engine. I watched his thumb move. Google. A results page loaded. He scrolled. His scrolling slowed. He tapped something and read. His jaw shifted. He read it again, and I saw the precise moment the information registered, a small tightening around his eyes, a barely perceptible change in his breathing pattern. You related to the Hale family? He asked, not looking up from the phone. I kept my expression open and mildly confused, which was not difficult because I had been practicing that expression for about 30 years. I don't know what you mean. Hale Logistics. He turned the phone screen toward me. It was a local business journal article from 11 months ago, a piece about a civil lawsuit involving Hale Logistics and a subcontractor dispute. My name appeared in the third paragraph as the father-in-law of Preston Hale, quoted briefly as a character reference. 4 words, my name in print. 4 words that were about to change everything. Castillo put the phone down and looked at the driver. He did not say anything immediately. He pressed the side of his thumb against his lower lip and stared out the windshield for several seconds. I could see him working through it, the math of coincidence versus opportunity. "Pull over," he said. The Tahoe stopped on a side street between 2 warehouses. Castillo took out a different phone, a prepaid by the look of it, thick case, no visible scratches, recently purchased, and dialed a number from memory. He waited. 1 ring, 2, the list connected. Castillo spoke without preamble. "Preston, you're not going to believe what just happened." The voice on the other end was too quiet for me to hear clearly from the back seat, but I recognized its cadence. I had listened to that voice at Thanksgiving dinners and birthday lunches and Sunday afternoon visits for 6 years. I knew the rhythm of it even when I could not make out the words. Castillo said, "We just did the First Valley job." A pause. "Yeah, but guess who we had to pull out as a shield?" He activated the camera on the prepaid phone, turned it toward me, and held it up for several seconds. The silence from the other end stretched long enough that even Castillo noticed. He lowered the phone slightly. "You there?" Preston's voice came through then, quiet but distinct. "Is that Silas?" "Your father-in-law?" Castillo confirmed. "In the flesh." Another silence, longer this time. I held very still. My bound hands rested on my knees. My heartbeat was measured, and even the way it always became when the situation clarified itself, when the fog of possibility burned off. And what remained was simply the problem in front of you, clean and specific and solvable. Then Preston said 3 words that told me everything I needed to know about the man my daughter had married. "Don't release him." Castillo's eyebrows rose slightly. Even he had not expected that. "That's going to cost you," Castillo said carefully. "We've got cops running plates all over the east side right now. Taking on extra cargo is not—" "Triple your rate," Preston said. His voice had gone flat and precise in a way that made my stomach drop, not for myself, but for Claire. This was not a man improvising under pressure. This was a man who had thought about contingencies, a man who, the moment an opportunity presented itself, moved to exploit it without hesitation. "Just keep him somewhere quiet until I can arrange the next step." Castillo looked at the man with the scar. The man with the scar looked at the driver. Something unspoken moved between them, the particular calculation of men weighing money against risk and finding that money, as it usually does, weighed more. "All right," Castillo said. "We'll be in touch." He ended the call. He looked at me with an expression I had seen on other faces in other places, the expression of a man who has just reclassified you from a problem into an asset. "Change of plans," he said. I looked out the window at the gap between the 2 warehouses at the narrow strip of pale August sky visible above the roofline. A pigeon landed on the sill of a high window and immediately departed, as if it had thought better of the neighborhood. "I gathered," I said. The Tahoe pulled back onto the street, and somewhere in the back of my mind, behind everything I was observing and cataloging and filing away, a single thought moved through me like a cold current. Preston had not hesitated, not even for a breath. The moment he saw my face on that screen, he had made his decision. 6 years of Sunday dinners and holiday photographs and calling me by a name I had never asked him to use, and it had taken him less than 4 seconds to decide that I needed to disappear. I thought about Claire. I thought about the folder with her name on it sitting on Preston's desk. I thought about the man with the tattoo and the bank statements and the money that had to disappear before Friday, and I thought about what I was going to do about all of it once we arrived wherever we were going. The warehouse district of Vernon spread out around us, gray and industrial and indifferent. The Tahoe rolled deeper into it. I was not afraid, but I was, for the first time in a very long while, completely and deliberately paying attention. The warehouse had not been used for anything legitimate in a long time. I could tell by the smell, that particular combination of stale concrete, rusted metal, and the ghost of whatever industrial solvent had been stored here years ago and never quite cleaned up. 3 of the original loading bay doors had been welded shut. The 4th at the north end was the one they brought me through. A single work light hung from a rafter on an extension cord, throwing a hard yellow circle across the center of the floor and leaving everything outside that circle in deep shadow. They sat me in a metal folding chair and zip-tied my wrists to the armrests. New ties tighter than the ones in the car, someone had thought more carefully this time. I tested the give without moving my hands visibly. About a quarter inch of play on the left side, slightly more on the right. The locking mechanism on the right tie had been fastened at a slightly off angle, which meant the plastic teeth were not fully engaged. I knew exactly how to get out of it. I had known for approximately 40 seconds. What I did not know yet was everything else, the full shape of what Preston had been doing, the extent of what Claire had unknowingly signed the name of the man with the tattoo from the night before. Those were the things I needed, and the only way to get them was to stay exactly where I was and give Castillo the impression that I was exactly what he believed me to be, a frightened old man with nowhere to go and no options left. Castillo pulled a folding chair of his own across the concrete floor. The legs scraped and shrieked against the surface in a way that made the man to my left flinch and sat down directly in front of me. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, his hands loosely clasped, studying me. The way a man studies a used car he is not sure he can trust. "You were at the house last night," he said. Not a question. I looked at him with the mildly bewildered expression of a man who had no idea what he was talking about. "I don't know what Preston told you." "Preston didn't tell me anything," Castillo said. "I'm asking you." I returned a toolbox. I let a small tremor enter my voice, not too much, just enough to be believable. "My son-in-law borrowed a set of wrenches. I drove out to Pasadena to drop them off. That's it." Castillo tilted his head. "You hear anything while you were there?" "I heard the garage door creak." I shifted in the chair, letting the zip ties pull taut at my wrists in a way that looked like discomfort rather than assessment. "I heard my daughter call out from upstairs. That's all I heard." Castillo watched me for a long moment. His jaw worked slightly the way jaws do when a man is deciding whether to believe something or not. Then he stood up, reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, and produced a phone. He turned the screen toward me. My daughter's face filled the photograph. Claire was walking out of her office building on South Flower Street in downtown Los Angeles. I recognized the glass facade, the potted olive trees flanking the entrance that the building management had put in 2 summers ago. She was in a gray blazer bag over one shoulder, moving with the particular purposeful stride she had inherited from her mother. Behind her, parked at the curb approximately 40 feet back, was a dark sedan. The photo had been taken from street level, from somewhere across the intersection. My chest did not tighten this time. What happened instead was something slower and more precise, of focusing the way a lens focuses when you adjust the ring, and the blurred image suddenly becomes sharp and specific and completely clear. I looked at the photograph for what Castillo would have interpreted as fearful fascination. What I was actually doing was examining the reflection in the glass doors of the building behind Claire's right shoulder. The sedan's reflection was visible in the glass. Claire's head was turned approximately 15 degrees to her left. Not enough to seem obvious, not enough for the photographer across the street to notice. But I noticed, because I had taught her that exact angle of observation when she was 16 years old, standing in the parking lot of a grocery store in Burbank, learning what her father called a game, and what I knew was the single most important habit I could give her. She was watching the sedan in the reflection of the glass doors. She already knew. The relief that moved through me in that moment was so sudden and so physical that I had to work to keep it off my face, a warmth behind my sternum, a loosening across my shoulders that I immediately suppressed. Claire knew she was being followed, which meant Claire was not walking blindly into whatever Preston had arranged for her. I looked up from the phone with an expression I calibrated carefully, just enough worry to be convincing, not enough to suggest I had seen what I had actually seen. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, letting my voice crack slightly at the edges. "Because Preston asked us to make sure you understood the situation," Castillo said. He pulled the phone back and slid it into his pocket. "You cooperate, answer some questions, tell us what you heard last night. Your daughter goes home tonight without any complications." "And if I don't cooperate?" Castillo's expression did not change. "Then someone makes a phone call." I nodded slowly, as if absorbing this, as if it meant something, as if I had not already decided that the photograph of my daughter had told me far more than Castillo intended it to. Then the man to my left, the one with the scar through his eyebrow, who had been going through my wallet and jacket pockets with the methodical patience of someone who had done a lot of searching in his life, held something up between 2 fingers. It was a coin, old, worn smooth on both faces, the size of a 50-cent piece but heavier. Challenge coin military issue, though, the specific markings had been partially worn away by years of handling. I had carried it in the inside compartment of my wallet since a night in a country I will not name given to me by a man whose name I will also not name after a situation that produced no paperwork of any kind. I had not thought about what it might mean to someone who knew what they were looking at. "At the heck is this?" the man with the scar asked, turning it over in his fingers. "Souvenir," I said. He squinted at the edge markings. "Looks military." "Lots of things look military," I said. "You can buy them at swap meets." He did not appear convinced. He took out his own phone and photographed both faces of the coin, then opened a text message and typed something brief before sending the image. He set the coin down on the edge of a nearby crate and went back to sorting through my jacket pockets. Castillo had been watching this exchange. He looked at me. "You ever serve?" he asked. "I fixed machines for 30 years, I said. Closest I got to the military was maintaining equipment for a defense contractor in the 90s. Calibration work. Castillo nodded slowly, but something behind his eyes had shifted a reassessment, subtle and not quite finished. He was not entirely satisfied with that answer. I could see him turning it over, looking for the edge that did not quite fit. Before he could push further, he hit me. It was not theatrical, no wind-up, no warning. He simply drove his fist into my midsection, with the compact efficiency of a man who has thrown that particular punch before and knows exactly how much force is required to produce a specific result. The air left my lungs in a single hard expulsion. I bent forward against the zip ties, coughing, my eyes watering from the involuntary physical response, rather than any genuine distress. While I was bent forward, I used the 3 seconds of obscured visibility to complete my assessment of the right zip tie. The locking mechanism was definitely misaligned. 2 rotations of the wrist at the correct angle, and the tie would release without any tool whatsoever. I straightened up slowly, breathing deliberately, letting Castillo see effort in the recovery. "I told you," I said, my voice rough at the edges. "I returned a toolbox, that's all I know." Castillo studied me. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen, and something in his posture shifted, a stiffening across the shoulders, a change in the set of his jaw that moved from controlled authority towards something less certain. He looked at the man with the scar. Then he looked at me. "We've got a situation," he said quietly to no one in particular. He stepped away from me and lifted the phone to his ear, and across the warehouse floor in the hard yellow light of that single work lamp, I waited, the way I had always waited, the way that had nothing to do with patience and everything to do with knowing that the most dangerous moment in any situation is not the one that announces itself. It is the one that arrives quietly while everyone is looking somewhere else. Castillo read the message twice. I could tell because his eyes moved across the screen. Stopped then, moved across it again. The same path, the same duration. Whatever his contact had sent back about the coin was not a simple answer. It was something that required reading more than once. He lowered the phone slowly. He looked at me with an expression I had not seen on his face, yet not the controlled authority of the warehouse, not the calculating assessment of the car. This was something quieter and more careful. The expression of a man who has just been told that the ground beneath him is not as solid as he assumed. "My guy wants to know something," Castillo said. I kept my hands loose in the zip ties. "Your guy can ask?" Castillo turned the phone screen toward me so I could read the message himself. It was short. His contact, whoever had received the photo of the coin, had written 4 sentences. I read them once and kept my face entirely neutral, which took more effort than anything else I had done that morning. If that coin is what I think it is, you need to be very careful. That's not a swap meet find. Send me the name on the ID again. And do not lock yourself in a room with him. Castillo pulled the phone back. He set it face down on the crate beside the coin and looked at me with the particular stillness of a man reassessing everything he thought he knew about a situation. "Old wolf," he said. "What is that?" He set the phone down and looked at me with an expression that had nothing certain left in it. "Who the hell are you?" he said barely above a whisper. I met his eyes and let the corner of my mouth drift into something quiet and unhurried. I did not answer him. I did not need to. The name landed in the center of my chest like something dropped from a height. I had not heard it spoken aloud in 29 years. Not at Helen's funeral, not at Claire's wedding, not during any of the 9 quiet years I had spent in Glendale, maintaining the careful, ordinary life I had built around the deliberate silence where that name used to live. I had heard it in my own head sometimes late at night, the way you hear an old song you have not thought about in decades and are surprised to find you still know every word. Hearing it now in this warehouse from this man, something shifted inside me. Not dramatically, not with any outward sign, but something moved the way tectonic plates move slowly, quietly, and with consequences that take time to fully understand. I don't know what that means, I said. Castillo picked up the coin and turned it between his fingers. My contact served 8 years, 2 combat deployments. He's not a man who gets nervous easily. He set the coin back down. He's nervous now. I watched him without responding. My right wrist was ready. 2 rotations at the correct angle, and the zip tie would release. I had been holding that option in reserve for the last 40 minutes, the way you hold a card, not because you are afraid to play it, but because timing is everything, and the moment had not arrived yet. It arrived when Castillo's phone rang. He answered it on speaker without thinking, or perhaps intentionally wanting me to hear, wanting to use whatever was on the other end as leverage. Preston's voice filled the warehouse, bouncing off the concrete walls and the welded bay doors and the hard yellow light overhead. "Has he said anything useful?" "Not yet," Castillo said, watching me. He heard more than he's letting on. Preston's voice was tight in a way I had never heard it before, not the smooth social confidence of Sunday dinners, not the easy authority of a man accustomed to being the most important person in whatever room he occupied. This was something stripped of all that, raw and calculating and very slightly afraid. He was at the house. He was in the hallway. I don't know for how long. "We'll keep working on him," Castillo said. A pause. Then Preston said something that made the man with the scar look up from his phone, made the driver shift his weight near the bay door, made Castillo's jaw tighten by a single visible degree. "Claire is not going home tonight," Preston said. "I need more time. If he won't talk voluntarily, use her. Make him understand what's at stake." My hands closed around the armrests of the chair. Not in fear, in something that was the precise opposite of fear, a cold, focused clarity that I had not felt in 29 years, and recognized immediately the way you recognize your own heartbeat. Preston was willing to put his wife in danger to protect himself, not as a last resort, as a contingency, a tool, something to be deployed when other tools proved insufficient. I thought about Claire at 16, standing in that grocery store parking lot, learning to check her mirrors without moving her head. I thought about her face in that photograph, gray blazer, purposeful stride, head turned 15 degrees to observe what she was not supposed to know she had seen. I thought about the folder with her name on it, the digital signatures, the money that had to disappear before Friday. And I thought about the man sitting across from me, who had just heard his employer instruct a criminal to use his wife as a pressure mechanism, and who was now looking at me with an expression that was no longer entirely comfortable. "Understood," Castillo said, and ended the call. The warehouse held the echo of Preston's voice for a moment, longer than was comfortable for anyone in it. The man with the scar was staring at a point on the floor, somewhere between his feet and the crate. The driver had turned to look out through the gap in the bay door. Castillo was looking at me. I looked back at him. "You just heard that?" I said. It was not a question. Castillo turned the phone over in his hands. His thumbs pressed against the case in a slow, rhythmic motion, the physical manifestation of a man thinking through something he would rather not be thinking through. "Job's a job," he said, but his voice had lost some of its flatness. "That wasn't a job," I said. "That was a husband authorizing harm to his own wife because she might become inconvenient." I let that sit for exactly 2 seconds. I've seen a lot of things in my life. That particular combination doesn't improve with repetition. Castillo looked at me sharply. "What does that mean, things you've seen in your life?" I rotated my right wrist. The zip tie released. The sound it made was very small, a faint plastic snap, barely audible over the ambient noise of the warehouse. But Castillo heard it. His eyes dropped to my wrist. He saw the tie hanging loose from the armrest. He saw my hand free resting on my knee with complete composure. His body started to move toward his weapon. I was already standing. What happened next took approximately 11 seconds. I know, because I counted the way I had been trained to count. Not frantically, not with any urgency, but with the measured internal rhythm of a man for whom time under pressure had always moved at a different speed than it did for everyone else. The man with the scar was closest. I used his own forward momentum. He had started to rise from his position near the crate to redirect him sideways into the metal shelving unit along the east wall. The shelving unit went over with a sound like a small avalanche. He went with it, his elbow connecting hard with the concrete floor, his breath leaving him in a single explosive grunt. The driver bolted for the bay door. I let him go. A man running away from a situation is not a threat to anyone inside it, and I had no interest in chasing anyone across a Vernon industrial lot at 67 years old, with a knee that already owed me a serious apology. Castillo had his hand on his weapon. He had not drawn it yet, partially because the situation had moved faster than he could track, and partially, I suspected, because something in the way I was standing had given him pause. Not the stance of a frightened old man, not the stance of a civilian. Something older and more specific than either of those things. He took his hand off the weapon. Good decision. I reached past him and picked up the prepaid phone he had used to call Preston. I also picked up my challenge coin from the crate and dropped it back into my jacket pocket where it belonged. Then I looked at Castillo, at the set of his jaw, at the calculation still moving behind his eyes, at the particular quality of stillness that had come over him in the last 30 seconds. "Sit down," I said. He sat. Not because I had a weapon pointed at him, not because I had physically forced him, but because somewhere in the last 11 seconds the entire nature of his understanding of this situation had changed. And men who are genuinely intelligent, and Castillo, whatever else he was genuinely intelligent, recognize when the ground has shifted and adjust accordingly. I pulled my chair around and sat down across from him. The same configuration as before, but reversed in every way that mattered. "Your employer," I said, "just told you to use his wife to pressure her father." I set the prepaid phone on the crate between us. "That phone has his voice on it, saying exactly that, which means you now have a problem that has nothing to do with me." Castillo's chest rose and fell steadily, but his hands resting on his knees pressed flat against his thighs, with a tension that told me his heart rate was considerably higher than his expression suggested. "What kind of problem?" he said. "The kind," I said, "where a man who just ordered a kidnapping and authorized harm to a family member is now the only thing standing between you and a federal conspiracy charge." I leaned forward slightly. "Or he could be the thing that hands you a way out, depending on what you decide to tell me in the next few minutes." Castillo looked at the phone. He looked at me. His jaw worked. His hands pressed harder against his thighs, the knuckles going pale at the edges. Then he said in a voice that had gone very quiet, "What do you want to know? Before I tell you what happened next inside that warehouse, and trust me, what happened next is something Preston never saw coming. I need to know if you're still with me. If you're listening to this on Revenge Dad, drop the number 67 in the comments right now. That's my age. That's the age they thought made me easy. Let me see how many of you are here." A quick note, the story ahead contains some fictional elements built for entertainment and reflection. If that's not your thing, no hard feelings. You're free to step away anytime. But if you're staying, you won't regret it. Everything I said. Start with the money. Castillo exhaled through his nose a long, controlled breath, the kind a man takes when he has made a decision he cannot unmake. His hands stopped pressing against his thighs. His shoulders dropped half an inch. "Preston has been pulling money out of Hale Logistics for close to 2 years, he said. "Not all at once. Small amounts routed through shell companies registered in Delaware and Nevada. 11 of them. Different names, different registered agents, no obvious connection to Preston or to Hale Logistics on the surface." "How much total?" $4.2 million. He said it flatly without drama, the way people say large numbers when they have been living close to them, long enough that the size stops registering. Most of it is already moved. The last transfer, $800,000, he was planning to push through before Friday. My jaw tightened, but I kept my voice even. "And Claire's name?" Castillo met my eyes. For the first time since the warehouse, he looked genuinely uncomfortable, not afraid of me, but uncomfortable with what he was about to say, which told me something about him that I filed away without comment. "The filings for 3 of the shell companies have Claire's name on them," he said. "Digital signatures, authorization timestamps. All of it looks like she approved the transactions herself." "She didn't?" I said. "No," Castillo said. "She didn't." The words landed between us and stayed there. I thought about Claire at her desk in that downtown office, working 60-hour weeks on contracts she believed in, completely unaware that her name was being used as a firewall between her husband and a federal fraud investigation. My throat tightened with something I did not have time for right now, so I set it aside and kept going. "Who else knows about this?" "A man named Derek Voss," Castillo said. Accountant, middleman. He's been moving the money between the shell companies for Preston, taking a fee, keeping records clean. But Voss got nervous about 3 months ago when he realized how large the operation had become. He told Preston he wanted out. Preston's response? Castillo almost smiled, but it did not reach anywhere near his eyes. Preston reminded him that Voss's name was also on the paperwork, told him they were both too deep to walk away. He paused. Voss believed him. For a while. I picked up the prepaid phone. I turned it over once in my hand, thinking about the recording of Preston's voice that lived inside it, the instruction to use Claire, the order to make sure I did not walk out of this warehouse. Evidence. Specific damning and entirely in Preston's own words. Why didn't Voss go to the authorities? I asked. Same reason most people don't, Castillo said. He thought he had more to lose than Preston did. He was wrong about that. But he would figure it out soon enough, and when he did, the entire structure Preston had spent 2 years building would begin collapsing from the inside out. I stood up. My right knee reminded me of every year I had ever lived, and I straightened slowly, feeling every one of my 67 years in the joints that always remembered the cold and the concrete and the particular physical cost of situations like this one. Voss kept records, I said. It was not a question. Castillo looked at me carefully. Why do you say that? Because men who get nervous get careful, I said. And careful men keep records. It's the only leverage they think they have. Something moved across Castillo's face, recognition, or something close to it. I took Castillo's personal phone from the crate, not the prepaid, his own, and held it out to him. Call whoever you need to call, I said. Then sit here and think very carefully about the difference between being Preston Hale's problem and being the man who helped end one. I walked to the bay door. Outside, the August heat of Vernon hit me full in the face. Exhaust fumes, chemical residue, the particular heavy air of an industrial corridor that never quite cooled down, even at night. I pulled out the prepaid phone and dialed a number I had not called in over 2 years. It rang once. Silas! Elias Ward's voice was exactly the same as it had always been. Low, unhurried, the voice of a man who had seen enough of the world to know that panic was almost never the correct response to any of it. Find Claire, I said. Don't look for me. Find her. A beat. One single beat. Already moving, Elias said. I ended the call, stood in the doorway of that warehouse with the prepaid phone in my hand and the August sun pressing down on my shoulders, and for the first time since 9:47 that morning, I let myself feel something close to relief. Not because the worst was over, it wasn't, but because the right people were now moving in the right direction, and Preston Hale, for all his careful planning, had made the oldest mistake in the world. He had underestimated the wrong old man. I did not witness what happened to Claire that afternoon. What I know, because she told me herself. Sitting across a weathered work table at Elias's boatyard in Long Beach with a cup of coffee going cold between her hands and her voice steady in the way that voices are steady when the person speaking has already cried everything out and arrived somewhere past it. She told me every detail. I listened without interrupting, and when she was done, I had to excuse myself and stand outside by the water for a few minutes, because what she described was not a frightened woman running from danger. It was my daughter operating exactly the way I had raised her to, and I had not fully understood until that moment how well she had actually learned. Claire left her office on South Flower Street at 3:47 that afternoon. She told me she had been uneasy since late morning, a tightness between her shoulder blades that she could not explain, the particular prickling awareness that something in the air had changed and she had not yet identified what. She noticed the sedan before she reached the sidewalk. Dark gray, she told me, wrapping both hands around the coffee cup as if she needed something solid to hold on to. 4-door, parked on the north side of the street with the engine running. I saw it in the glass of the revolving door before I even stepped outside. What did you do? I asked. Oh, what you taught me, she said, and then she laughed, a short, involuntary sound that had some tears still mixed into it. I kept walking, normal pace, normal direction. I used the window of the dry cleaner on the corner to check if it pulled out. Did it? The moment I hit the sidewalk. Her jaw tightened, her fingers pressed harder against the cup. Stayed about 40 feet back, very professional, not following too close, not letting any other cars get between us. She had turned left on 6th Street instead of right, which was the direction of the parking structure where she always left her car. She went into a coffee shop, stayed 4 minutes, came back out, and turned in the opposite direction. The sedan adjusted both times. By the time she reached the Grove in West Hollywood, 20 minutes and 3 deliberate turns later, she was entirely certain. I remembered what you said about department stores. She told me, her eyes bright in a way that was equal parts pride and something that looked dangerously close to more tears. Multiple floors, multiple exits, camera coverage, crowds that make it hard to follow without being obvious. She went in through the main entrance on Fairfax, walked the length of the ground floor without stopping, took the escalator up. 2 levels, crossed to the far end of the building, came back down on the service stairs, and exited through the delivery access on the east side that most shoppers never knew existed. When Preston called, and he did call, she told me twice in 15 minutes. Her voice was perfectly steady. "He asked where I was," she said. "I told him I was still at the office finishing a contract review. He said he was worried about me." A pause, her mouth pressed into a thin, hard line. "He said it like he meant it." "He probably did," I said, "in his way." Claire looked at me across the table with an expression I had never quite seen on her face before. Not hurt, not angry. Something more precise than either of those things. The expression of a person who has just finished assembling a puzzle and does not like the picture, but cannot argue with the pieces. "I sat in the bathroom at the Grove for 11 minutes, she said. "I had my phone out. I was going to call you." Her voice cracked slightly at that, just at the edges, just for a moment before she pulled it back. "And then I thought, if something is wrong enough that I need to call you, then whatever is happening is bigger than just me being followed. And if it's bigger than just me, then you already know about it. And if you already know about it, you needed to stay clear," I said. "I needed to stay clear," she repeated. She nodded once firmly, the way she had nodded as a child when she had worked something out for herself and wanted me to know she had gotten there on her own. She had not called me. She had called no one. She had simply gotten herself out of a situation with nothing but the habits she had spent 20 years dismissing as her father's eccentricities. Elias found her at a coffee shop 2 blocks from the Grove at 4:15. He had been tracking the sedan's license plate since the moment I called him. He had eyes on the vehicle before Claire had even reached the Grove, and he had photographed the plate from 3 different angles with the patience of a man who understood that documentation was frequently more valuable than intervention. When Claire saw him walk through the door of that coffee shop, she told me that her legs went weak underneath her, genuinely weak, the kind of weak where you grip the edge of the table because you are not entirely certain your knees will hold. She stood up anyway. She walked to him. She did not cry until he said her name, and then she cried hard enough that the barista brought over a glass of water without being asked. "He didn't tell me anything," she said. "He just sat down across from me and said, 'Your father says hello.' And I knew you were okay." I had to look away from her when she said that. Out the window of the boatyard at the harbor, at the lights beginning to come up over the water as the sun went down. "Elias got the plate," I said, mostly to have something to say. "He gave it to me," Claire said. "I was going to give it to the police." She hesitated. "But then Elias said there was someone I needed to hear from first." She meant me. On the drive down to Long Beach, Elias had told her one thing, not about my history, not about what I had done in the warehouse, not about Old Wolf or a sad Sog, or any of the parts of my life I had spent 3 decades keeping separate from hers. He had told her only this. "Your father called me. First thing he said was, 'Find you.' Not find him, find you." Claire wrapped her fingers tighter around the coffee cup and looked at me across that weathered table with eyes that were red at the rims and completely fiercely steady in the center. "So here I am," she said. "Here you are," I said. And outside the Long Beach harbor turned gold and then dark as the evening came in off the water, and somewhere across the city, Preston Hale was still believing he had time. He did not. Martha Quinn called me on the Tuesday that followed everything 4 days after Preston's arrest, 4 days after the smoke had finally cleared enough to see what was underneath it. She called on a Tuesday morning, and I was in the backyard trying to coax my lawnmower back to life. When I saw her name on the screen, I sat down on the back steps and gave her my full attention. "I need to tell you something," she said, "because you deserve to know how it actually happened." "Tell me," I said. So she did. Martha had gone back to the branch that same Thursday afternoon, not because anyone told her to, but because she had worked in that building for 23 years, and she was not the kind of woman who went home and waited for other people to figure things out. She reviewed the security footage herself, starting from the morning of the robbery, and working backwards 72 hours. and what she found made her stomach drop, in a way she described to me as feeling like missing a step in the dark. 3 days before the robbery, one of the men had come into the branch alone. No mask. Business casual clothes, the kind that say nothing specific about who you are or what you do. He had approached the customer service desk and asked 2 questions. How long was the typical wait for safe deposit box access on weekday mornings? And did the branch have any regular customers who came in on a fixed schedule? The young woman at the desk had been helpful. She had not thought anything of it. Why would she? He looked like a man planning a routine visit. She told him about the Thursday schedule, Martha said, and I could hear the tightness in her voice, not guilt exactly, but the particular pain of a person who understands that something preventable happened, and there was no way to have seen it coming. She didn't mention you by name, but she said the branch had several long-term customers who came in reliably on the last Thursday of each month. She didn't do anything wrong, I said. I know that, Martha said. It doesn't make it easier. She had also found a 4th man in the footage, someone who had come in the same day as the scout 40 minutes later, and had sat in the waiting area for 22 minutes without conducting any apparent business. He had positioned himself in the chair with the widest sightline in the lobby. He had watched the teller windows, the safe deposit corridor, and the security guard's patrol pattern. Martha had pulled a still image from that footage and sent it to the FBI field office in Los Angeles. She did not have to wait long for a response. They came to the branch within 2 hours, she told me. 2 agents, very professional, very thorough. They took the full footage package and ran the image through their system. She paused. They came back to me the next morning with a name. Derek Voss, I said, a beat of surprise on her end. You already knew. I knew the name, I said. I didn't know he'd been in your branch. What the FBI told Martha and what she relayed to me with the careful precision of a woman who had listened closely and retained everything was that Derek Voss had a file with the Securities and Exchange Commission dating back to 2019. A civil enforcement action involving fraudulent accounting on behalf of a real estate investment group. He had paid a fine, accepted a 5-year industry bar, and apparently concluded that the lesson was not to stop doing what he had been doing, but to do it more carefully next time. The facial recognition had been run through the FBI's NGI system, the Next Generation Identification Database, which maintains biometric records on over 200 million individuals, including anyone who has ever been fingerprinted in connection with a federal or state proceeding. Voss's prints and photograph were in the system from the 2019 action. The match had come back in under 4 minutes. What happened after the identification? I asked. They pulled financial records, Martha said. They had a subpoena for Hale Logistics account activity within the same afternoon. She paused again, and when she spoke next, her voice was quieter, more careful. Silas, they told me they already had an open file on Hale Logistics. A SAR, a suspicious activity report, had been filed 3 weeks earlier by a compliance officer at the bank that handles Hale's commercial accounts. Unusual transaction patterns. Multiple transfers in amounts just below federal reporting thresholds. I understood immediately what that meant. Preston had been careful enough to keep individual transfers under $10,000, which was the threshold that triggered automatic currency transaction reports under the Bank Secrecy Act. But the pattern itself had been flagged. Computers noticed patterns that humans missed, and bank compliance systems in 2025 were very good at noticing patterns. So, the footage didn't start the investigation, I said. It accelerated one that was already running, Martha said. The agent I spoke with said it was like she used the phrase lighting a fuse that was already laid. They had the structure. They needed the connection. Derek Voss in that lobby gave them the connection. By 5 o'clock that Thursday afternoon, the FBI had identified Derek Voss, pulled 2 years of Hale Logistics financial records, cross-referenced 17 shell company filings in Delaware and Nevada, and confirmed that the name appearing most frequently on the intermediate documentation was Claire Rourke Hale, a woman who, as far as the agents could initially determine, might have been a willing participant. They thought Claire was involved, I asked, and something sharp moved through my chest at the question. For about 40 minutes, Martha said, until they pulled her employment records and tax filings and realized she was a salaried contract attorney who had been paying her own estimated quarterly taxes on a straightforward W-2 income for 6 consecutive years. The financial profile didn't fit, she exhaled. One of the agents said, and I'm quoting here, Nobody who's actually stealing $4 million files their taxes this carefully. I almost laughed at that. Almost. The freeze order on Preston's accounts went through at 5 o'clock, Martha continued. All 11 shell companies, the Hale Logistics operational accounts, and 2 personal accounts in Preston's name. She paused. The agent told me the last attempted transfer, $800,000, hit the freeze wall at 5:17. Preston tried to push it through twice more after that. Both attempts failed. He had been on the phone with me at 6 o'clock, demanding to know where I was calling me by a name he had no right to use. And the entire time, his money had been locked behind a federal freeze order for 43 minutes. Martha, I said. Yes. You didn't have to go back to that branch on your own, I said. Nobody asked you to do that. A short pause on her end. When she spoke again, her voice had the particular warmth of a person who does not take compliments easily and is not entirely sure what to do with gratitude. You come into my branch every last Thursday of the month, she said. You've been doing it for 9 years. You always ask how my daughter is doing at UC Davis. Another pause. Of course I went back. I looked out at the backyard. The lawnmower sat where I had left it, patient and broken in the August heat. Thank you, Martha, I said. Don't thank me, she said. Just keep showing up on Thursdays. Back on that Thursday evening, before Martha's call, before any of it settled into something I could name the call, came at exactly 6 o'clock. I was on the 110 South somewhere between Compton and Carson, the highway opening up ahead of me in the early evening light. The sun had dropped behind the western hills, and the sky had gone the particular shade of amber that only exists in Los Angeles in late August. Warm and heavy and slightly unreal, like the city was running a fever it had learned to live with. Preston's name appeared on the screen of the prepaid phone. Not my phone, the prepaid, the one I had taken from the warehouse. I had been expecting this. Preston had tried to reach Castillo first, almost certainly, and Castillo had not answered for reasons that were now entirely Preston's problem. So, Preston had gone to the next available number, the one he had called into that warehouse. The one that now sat in my jacket pocket instead of on a warehouse floor in Vernon. I answered on the third ring. Where are you? Preston said. Not hello, not are you all right. Where are you? 6 years of Sunday dinners, 6 years of passing the bread and asking about the football scores and pretending that the discomfort I felt every time this man walked into a room was nothing more than the ordinary awkwardness of a father-in-law who had not quite found his footing with his daughter's husband. 6 years of that, and the first thing he said when he thought he was calling the men he had hired to make me disappear was, "Where are you?" I kept my voice level. "I'm driving." A pause. Short, sharp, the sound of a man recalibrating. He recognized my voice immediately. I heard it in the quality of the silence that followed that particular stillness of someone who has just realized the conversation they thought they were having is not the conversation they are actually having. "Silas!" His voice had changed completely. The command register was gone. In its place was something that tried to be warmth and did not quite get there, like a man putting on a coat that used to fit and discovering the shoulders are wrong. "I've been trying to reach you. Are you all right? I heard there was an incident at the bank this morning." An incident. I merged left around a slow-moving delivery truck. The city spread out on both sides of the highway, all concrete and streetlight and the blue flicker of television screens behind apartment windows. "You heard about the incident," I said. "It's all over the news." His voice was careful now, measured. The voice of a man who was not sure how much the person on the other end of the line knew, and who was buying time while he figured it out. "Claire has been trying to reach you all day. We've both been worried sick." Claire had been trying to reach me, the same Claire who was at that moment sitting in Elias Ward's boatyard in Long Beach, with a cold cup of coffee and red-rimmed eyes. The same Claire who had spent the afternoon outrunning the men Preston had sent to follow her. The rage that moved through me in that moment was clean and cold and very precise. Not the hot, uncontrolled kind that makes people do stupid things. The other kind, the kind that clarifies, that strips away everything unnecessary and leaves only what matters. I let it pass through me and kept driving. "Preston," I said. "Yes. I was in that bank for 9 years of last Thursdays before this morning," I said. "Helen started the habit. I kept it after she passed. You knew that. You've known it for 6 years. A beat. Of course I knew. What does that have to do with... You knew my routine, I said. You knew I was there that morning. I moved into the right lane as the Carson exit approached, And the second those men dragged me into that car, you didn't try to save me. You paid them to make me disappear. The silence this time was different, longer, the kind of silence that is not a pause in a conversation, but the sound of a person deciding what kind of person they are going to be in the next 30 seconds. I don't know what you think you heard, Preston said. His voice had gone flat and careful in a way that reminded me of the voice I had listened to through the gap in the door 2 nights ago. The real voice, the one underneath the Sunday dinner version. But you're an intelligent man, Silas. Intelligent enough to know that some situations are more complicated than they appear on the surface. You're right, I said. I am intelligent enough to know that. Then you understand that what you may have overheard, if you overheard anything, was taken out of context. He was finding his footing now, settling into the register of a man who had talked his way out of difficult corners before and expected to do it again. I've been dealing with a very complicated business situation, restructuring, legal complexities that I couldn't discuss openly. I should have been more transparent with you and with Claire, and I take responsibility for that. I took the exit and stopped at the light at the bottom of the ramp. A woman in the car next to mine was singing along to something on the radio, her fingers drumming on the steering wheel, completely at ease in her ordinary Thursday evening. You called me Papa the way Helen taught you for 6 years, I said. Preston hesitated. I'm sorry. You used Helen's grandfather's word for me for 6 years. You made a performance of honoring our family. I thought it was genuine. The light turned green. I was wrong. Preston said nothing. For the first time in the conversation, he had nothing ready. I want you to know something, I said. You said this morning, or you said it to the men you hired, which comes to the same thing, that I was just a retired machine mechanic, that you could handle me. The boatyard was 12 minutes away. I could see the first hint of harbor lights beginning to appear on the southern horizon. You were right that I worked with machines. You were right that I retired. Everything else you assumed about me was wrong. Silas, I'm not angry with you, I said, and I meant it, which I think surprised me as much as it would have surprised him. Anger was too simple for what I felt, too small. I'm disappointed, but that's a conversation for another day, and it's not a conversation you'll be having with me. What does that mean? His voice had sharpened. The warmth was entirely gone now. Where is Claire? I need to speak with Claire. Claire is somewhere safe, I said. She'll speak with you when she's ready, which may be a while. Silas, I'm warning you. Preston. I said his name the way I had said names in other situations in other years, in a voice that came from somewhere older and quieter than anger. The accounts are frozen. The shell companies have been identified. Derek Voss spent last night on the phone with a federal prosecutor. I heard his breath change on the other end of the line, a sharp involuntary intake quickly controlled. You tried to send $800,000 at 5:17 this evening. It didn't go through. It won't go through. The silence that followed was the longest of the entire conversation. When Preston finally spoke, his voice had shed everything, the warmth, the authority, the careful management, the Sunday dinner version of himself. What remained was something stripped and raw and very small. How long have you known? He said. I thought about Wednesday night, the garage door, the crack in the door, the folder with Claire's name on it sitting on Preston's desk, the man with the tattoo on his wrist. I thought about Helen's habit of last Thursdays, which had put me in that bank at exactly the right moment to be chosen as a shield by a man who thought I was the safest option in the room. Long enough, I said. I ended the call. The harbor lights of Long Beach spread across the southern horizon, gold and steady against the darkening water. I put the prepaid phone in my jacket pocket and drove the last 11 minutes without turning on the radio, the way I had driven home from Pasadena 2 nights ago, in the particular quiet of a man who has said exactly what needed to be said and has nothing left to add. Claire was waiting. The coffee was cold. The hard part was just beginning. But Preston Hale, for the first time in 2 years of careful planning, had absolutely no idea what to do next. Elias Ward's boatyard sat at the southern end of Long Beach Harbor, tucked between a commercial marine supply warehouse and a dry dock facility that had been operating since before either of us was born. It was not a pretty place, weathered timber, rusted cleats, the permanent smell of salt and diesel and fiberglass resin that never quite aired out, no matter how hard the harbor wind blew. Elias had owned it for 19 years and had never once expressed any interest in making it look like anything other than what it was. I had always liked that about it. Claire was sitting at the long work table near the center of the main building when I came through the side door. She was facing the entrance, the same instinct I had, the same instinct I had spent years pretending was just a preference for good sightlines. The moment she saw me, she stood up fast enough that the stool she had been sitting on rocked back and nearly tipped, and then she crossed the distance between us at something just short of running. She hit me hard enough that I took a step back. Her arms went around my ribs and she pressed her face against my shoulder and made a sound that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Something between a sob and a breath of relief, the sound of a person who has been holding themselves together through an entire afternoon of fear and is finally somewhere safe enough to let go of it. I held on. My chin came down on top of her head the way it had when she was small enough to fit under my arm entirely. She was 35 years old and a licensed attorney and the most capable person I knew, and she felt exactly the same as she had at 6 at 12, at the age she had figured out how to pick the lock on the back gate, because I had accidentally left her outside in the rain, and she decided that waiting for someone else to solve the problem was not acceptable. "You're okay," she said into my shoulder. Not a question, more like something she was saying to herself, checking it against reality. "I'm okay," I said. She pulled back and looked at my face with a particular inventory of a person looking for damage. Her eyes were red and swollen at the edges from earlier crying, but they were focused and clear in the center, taking in the bruising along my jaw, the small cut above my left eyebrow that had already begun to close on its own. "That needs cleaning," she said, reaching up toward the cut. "Later," I said. She dropped her hand, pressed her lips together. Then she walked back to the work table, and I followed her, and we sat across from each other the way we had sat across at kitchen tables and restaurant booths and hospital waiting rooms. Our whole lives, two people who had learned to talk to each other honestly because Helen had insisted on it, and neither of us had ever found a good reason to stop. I told her about the warehouse, about Preston's voice through the phone speaker, about what Castillo had told me, and what I had taken from that warehouse, and what I had said on the phone an hour ago on the 110 South. Claire listened without interrupting. Her hands were flat on the table in front of her, and as I talked, I watched her fingers press slowly into the wood, not dramatically, not theatrically. Just the gradual tightening of a person, receiving information that is difficult to receive, processing it the only way she knew how, which was completely and without looking away. When I finished, the harbor outside was fully dark. The lights on the water moved with the slow pulse of the tide. Claire exhaled, a long, controlled breath, the kind that is not quite a sigh. Then she said, "I need to show you something." She reached into the bag on the bench beside her and produced her phone. She opened the photo library and turned the screen toward me. The first image was a document, a financial filing partial view, the kind of dense legal formatting that is designed to communicate authority and obscure meaning simultaneously. At the top in the field marked authorized signatory was Claire's full name, Claire Rourke Hale. "I never signed that," she said. Her voice was steady, flat in the way that voices go flat when the person speaking has already done their grieving about something and arrived at the other side of it. "I've never seen that document before in my life." She swiped to the next image, another filing, same name in the same field, then another, and another. "How many?" I asked. 47 photographs, she said. "Over 2 months." She set the phone down on the table between us. Every time Preston left a document out on his desk on the kitchen counter in his briefcase when he forgot to close it, I photographed it. I didn't know exactly what I was looking at. I knew it felt wrong. She pressed the heel of her hand briefly against her sternum, as if something there needed to be steadied. It felt wrong the way things feel wrong before you have the language for why. I looked at the phone. 47 photographs. 60 days of quiet, careful, systematic documentation, conducted entirely in secret, while she went on living in that house going to work, answering Preston's calls, saying everything was fine. In the same 60 days that I had been watching her from a distance, noticing the changes, deciding not to push, she had been doing the same thing I had been doing. "There's something else?" she said. She swiped forward in the photo library past the financial documents and stopped on an image that was different from the others. A document with different formatting, simpler, cleaner, the kind of language that was designed to be understood rather than obscured. A draft settlement agreement. I leaned forward and read. The document was dated 4 months ago. It was formatted as a marital settlement agreement, the standard California Family Code framework for an uncontested dissolution of marriage. Most of the terms were left blank, placeholder language for assets and accounts still to be specified. But one clause had been filled in completely in precise legal language that had clearly been written by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Claire Rourke Hale herein, after referred to as wife, agrees to waive all rights to audit, review, or contest any financial records, accounts, or transactions conducted during the period of the marriage. Claire watched me read it. Her jaw was set, her eyes were dry. The crying was finished, at least for now, and what had replaced it was something harder and more permanent. He drafted a divorce agreement 4 months ago, she said. Before any of this, before the robbery, before anything you overheard, before any of it became visible. She tapped the screen once. The only clause he bothered to fill in was the one that would have stopped me from ever looking at the money. The heat that moved through me was not anger. I had moved past anger somewhere on the 110 South. What I felt now was something colder and more structural, the feeling of understanding a thing completely all the way down to its foundations and finding nothing there worth saving. He planned to divorce you, I said. After he finished moving the money, she said. After my name was on enough paperwork that any investigation would find me first. She picked up the phone and turned it face down on the table. He needed me cooperative for the financial setup. Then he needed me legally barred from looking into it. Then he needed me gone. I thought about the man I had watched through that crack in the doorway 2 nights ago. The flat, careful voice. The total absence of hesitation. The way he had said, Claire doesn't know anything about it, like her ignorance was a managed condition rather than a fact about his wife. Elias appeared from the back of the building, carrying 2 fresh mugs of coffee, set them down without comment, and disappeared again. That was Elias entirely present when presence was needed, absent when absence was better. Claire wrapped both hands around the mug. Her knuckles had gone pale at the pressure points, and her chin was doing the thing it had done since she was a child, when she was refusing to cry about something, a slight rhythmic tightening, a jaw held against itself. I knew something was wrong, she said. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, just at the very edge, just enough to be heard. I've known for 2 months. I just kept thinking. She stopped, pressed her lips together hard, then started again. I kept thinking maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was looking at things that had a different explanation. Maybe the person I married was not the person I was looking at. She looked up at me across the table. Her eyes were bright and fierce and very, very tired. He's the person you were looking at, I said. She nodded once. A single firm movement, the way she had nodded as a child when she had worked something out and needed me to know she was certain. I know, she said. I've known for a while. I just needed to hear someone else say it. Outside, the harbor moved in the dark. The diesel smell and the salt and the slow knock of hulls against their moorings. The ordinary sounds of a place that kept working regardless of what the people inside it were going through. I pushed one of Elias's mugs toward her. She picked it up. Her hands had stopped shaking. I was not there when Derek Voss made his decision. What I know came from the federal prosecutor assigned to the case, relayed to me 6 weeks later in a conference room on the 14th floor of the Edward R. Roybal Federal Building in downtown Los Angeles, while Claire sat beside me with a legal pad and wrote down everything the prosecutor said with the focused efficiency of a woman who had recently decided that the law was something she intended to use rather than merely practice. Derek Voss, the prosecutor, told us, received the email at 9:43 that Thursday evening. It looked ordinary, an internal restructuring memo formatted on Hale Logistics letterhead, carbon, copied to 3 recipients. Claire's name was second on the list. Voss's name was third. The memo outlined a series of financial adjustments to several subsidiary accounts, the kind of language that meant almost nothing on its own, and everything in context. Voss had sat with that email for 11 minutes before he called his attorney. The prosecutor told us this with the particular satisfaction of someone who had seen a case come together the way cases rarely did, cleanly, quickly, with the evidence arriving in the right order. She was a compact woman in her early 50s with reading glasses pushed up into her hair and the focused energy of someone who had been doing this work for a long time and still found it genuinely interesting. Voss understood immediately what the email was, she told us. It was a paper trail, deliberately constructed. His name and your daughter's name on the same distribution list as a financial adjustment memo meant that if anyone ever pulled that document in discovery, it would look like both of them had been kept informed of the transactions. She set her pen down on the table. Preston Hale was building his exit. He just didn't know his exit was already closed. Derek Voss had been recording his conversations with Preston for 14 months. Not because he anticipated prosecution, because he was a man who had been through an SEC enforcement action in 2019 and had learned the specific visceral lesson that when things go wrong, the person with documentation survives and the person without it does not. He recorded everything: phone calls, voice messages, 2 in-person meetings captured on his phone's audio recorder while it sat face down on a restaurant table. The recordings ran to 9 hours and 40 minutes of total audio. In one segment recorded 4 months ago in a restaurant in Torrance, Preston's voice was clear and entirely unambiguous. He said in reference to the final transfer sequence that the objective was to ensure that any investigative trail would reach Claire's authorization records before it reached anything connected to him directly. He used the phrase clean separation. He used it twice. In another segment recorded the previous Tuesday, 2 days before the robbery, 2 days before any of it became what it became, Preston had told Voss that a certain party who had become aware of the situation would need to be managed before the end of the week. The prosecutor looked at me when she quoted that line. "He meant you," she said. "I know," I said. Claire's pen had stopped moving. She was staring at the legal pad at the notes she had been taking, her jaw set in the hard, controlled way it had been set every day since Long Beach. Then she pressed the tip of the pen back to the paper and kept writing. Because that was what she did. She kept going. Voss had arrived at the FBI field office on Wilshire at 11:15 that Thursday night. His attorney was with him. He had a digital drive containing all 9 hours of recordings, 14 months of email correspondence, and a detailed written timeline of every transaction he had facilitated, with account numbers, transfer dates, and the names of the 11 shell companies. He had also written by hand on 2 pages of yellow legal paper a complete account of the conversation in which Preston had first proposed the arrangement, including the specific language Preston had used to assure him that Claire would never know her name was being used, because Preston had said she trusted him completely. The cooperation agreement was signed at 2:17 Friday morning. In exchange for full cooperation and complete disclosure, the U.S. Attorney's Office agreed to recommend a significantly reduced sentence: 3 years of supervised probation. No prison time provided. Voss's testimony proved accurate and complete at trial. The prosecutor slid a copy of the agreement across the conference table. Claire picked it up and read it without expression, turning the pages steadily the way she read everything. When she set it down, she said, "He kept records for 14 months. "He did," the prosecutor said. Claire looked at me across the table. Something moved across her face, not quite irony, not quite exhaustion, somewhere between the two. 14 months, she said again quietly. And Preston thought he was the careful one. Vernon Hale called me at 7:42 Friday morning. I was at Elias's boatyard sitting on the dock with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, watching a pelican work the surface of the harbor with the unhurried patience of a creature that understood something about waiting that most people never figured out. Claire was asleep in the back office on a folding cot that Elias kept there for overnight jobs. I had not slept at all. I did not recognize the number. I answered anyway. "Mr. Rourke." The voice was older, careful, the voice of a man accustomed to authority, who was not entirely certain in this particular moment that authority was what the situation called for. "This is Vernon Hale. I don't know if Preston has ever mentioned that we've spoken." "He hasn't," I said. A pause. Outside, the pelican hit the water and came up with something silver in its bill. "I owe you an apology," Vernon said. "I'm not sure an apology covers what I owe you, but it's where I need to start." I had built a picture of Vernon Hale over 6 years, from the edges of conversations, Preston's passing references, Claire's occasional mentions, the frame photograph in Preston's office of a man in his 60s, standing in front of a Hale logistics warehouse with his hand on his son's shoulder, both of them squinting into the sun. I had never met him in person. I had never needed to. "FBI agents arrived at our Torrance facility at 6:15 this morning," Vernon said. "They had a subpoena for 6 years of financial records, account histories, transaction logs, subsidiary documentation." His voice was steady, but underneath the steadiness was something that was working very hard to stay that way. "My CFO pulled me out of a board call to tell me. We reviewed what we could before the agents arrived." "What did you find?" I asked. $4.2 million, he said. "Moved over 22 months through accounts I had no knowledge of. shell companies in Delaware and Nevada, and the name on the intermediate authorization documents. He stopped. I heard him draw a breath that was longer than a normal breath, the kind a person takes when they need a moment to keep their voice from doing something they would rather it did not do. The name on the documents was Claire's. I looked out at the harbor. The Pelican was gone. "Mr. Hale," I said. "Vernon," he said. "Please." Vernon. I set the cold coffee down on the dock beside me. "Your son made a choice, several choices over a long period of time. None of those choices are yours." "Yes, I signed documents," he said, and his voice cracked on the last word, just once, just briefly, the sound of a 68-year-old man confronting the specific pain of realizing that his trust had been used as a tool. "Quarterly reviews, budget approvals. I signed things my son put in front of me because I trusted him, because he was my son." A pause. "I may have made it easier without knowing I was doing it." I did not tell him he was wrong about that. He was not wrong about that. "He used Claire's name," Vernon said. The crack was gone from his voice, now replaced by something harder and colder that I recognized the specific tone of a person who has finished grieving and arrived at the part where something has to be done. "My son put his wife's name on fraudulent documents to protect himself. That is not something I can—" He stopped, started again. "I have a call scheduled with the U.S. Attorney's Office at 9 o'clock this morning. I intend to provide full cooperation. Every record, every document, every conversation I can reconstruct." Another pause. "I wanted you to know that before it happened. I wanted you to hear it from me." I looked at the door to the back office where Claire was sleeping. "Thank you," I said. "How is she?" Vernon asked. The question landed quietly and stayed there. An old man asking about his daughter-in-law, the woman his son had spent 2 years setting up, to take a fall with a genuine ache in his voice that had nothing performative about it. "She's strong," I said. "She always has been." Vernon exhaled. "She deserves better than what my family gave her." "She'll be all right," I said. "She's already decided to be." We ended the call without ceremony. I sat on the dock for another few minutes, listening to the harbor. Then I picked up the cold coffee, stood up slowly, my knee sending its usual morning complaint up through my hip, and went inside to start a fresh pot before Claire woke up. Some things you could not fix, but you could make sure the coffee was hot. Claire drove herself to her attorney's office on Figueroa Street that Friday morning. She told me about it later that evening back at the boatyard, with the particular calm of someone delivering a report. They have already emotionally processed the facts. First, the feeling underneath the facts available, if you knew where to look for it. Her attorney was a woman named Sandra Okafor, early 50s, 20 years of family law in Los Angeles, the kind of practitioner who had seen enough variation of human behavior that very little surprised her anymore. Claire had retained her 9 months ago initially for a routine employment contract review, the kind of quiet personal housekeeping that a careful attorney does for herself. But 2 months ago, when the documents had begun to feel wrong, she had gone back to Sandra for something else entirely. That shift told me something I had not known and filed away without comment. 9 months ago, before any of this had a shape, Claire had already begun preparing, even if neither of us had known yet what she was preparing for. Sandra had pulled Preston's financial disclosures as part of the standard pre-filing review, the documentation a spouse is legally required to provide under California Family Code, Section 2100, which mandates full and accurate disclosure of all assets, debts, and income before any dissolution proceedings can begin. Preston had filed his preliminary disclosures 3 weeks earlier, which meant he had already been anticipating the divorce on his own timeline. The disclosures were incomplete. Sandra had identified 7 accounts not listed. 2 of them matched shell company names that appeared in the FBI's subpoena documentation, which Sandra had obtained through a contact at the U.S. Attorney's Office that same morning. But it was the insurance policy that stopped everything. Preston had purchased a life insurance policy on Claire 14 months ago, $1,200,000. The original beneficiary designation listed Preston Hale as primary, straightforward, legal, the kind of policy that couples took out on each other routinely and without any sinister implication. Sandra had seen hundreds of them. What Sandra had not seen before was the amendment. 3 months ago, Preston had filed a beneficiary change with the insurance carrier. The new primary beneficiary was listed as Margaret Ann Hale Preston's mother. Date of birth, address, everything filled in correctly. Margaret Ann Hale had passed away 5 years ago. Sandra had confirmed it that morning through the California Death Index before Claire arrived at the office. And 2 weeks after filing that amendment, Preston had contacted an estate attorney in Henderson, Nevada, to inquire about establishing a testamentary trust in the name of a recently deceased individual for the purpose of receiving and distributing a future insurance proceeds payment. The Nevada attorney had declined the engagement, and as Sandra explained with the measured tone of someone presenting information that speaks for itself, had documented the inquiry in writing. That documentation was now in the hands of the FBI. Claire told me all of this at the work table in the boatyard, her hands flat on the surface, her voice even. She had cried that morning, she said in Sandra's office briefly when Sandra had explained what the amendment meant in practical terms. What it meant was that Preston had structured the policy so that if Claire died before the divorce was finalized, the payout would go to a beneficiary who no longer existed, routed through a trust controlled by Preston, untraceable and clean. She had cried for about 4 minutes. Then she had asked Sandra for a tissue, wiped her face, and told her to continue. I listened to all of it without moving. When she finished, I stood up from the table, walked to the dock door, and stood there looking at the harbor for a while. The water was very flat that evening, almost no wind. The kind of stillness that feels like the world holding its breath. When I came back inside, Claire was watching me with those red-rimmed, fierce, exhausted eyes. "Say something," she said. "I don't have the right words," I said, "so I won't use the wrong ones." Her chin started doing the thing it did. She pressed her lips together hard and stared at the table surface and breathed through her nose until it stopped. "Sandra filed the dissolution paperwork this afternoon," she said. "Irreconcilable differences, standard language." She looked up. She also submitted a victim impact statement to the U.S. Attorney's Office documenting the insurance amendment and the Nevada Trust inquiry. "The prosecutor called while I was still in Sandra's office," Claire said. "She told me Castillo had provided a supplemental statement that morning. During his cooperation debrief, he confirmed that Preston had used those exact words that Claire would need to be dealt with cleanly before the divorce was finalized. Not removed from the paperwork, dealt with." She set her hands flat on the table. "When you put that statement alongside the insurance policy, the dead beneficiary, and the Nevada Trust inquiry, the U.S. attorney had enough to add a charge." Her voice stayed level. "Attempted murder conspiracy." She said it like it was a routine update, like she was telling me about a scheduling change. She picked up the coffee mug in front of her. It was empty. She looked into it anyway, the way people look into empty cups when they need somewhere to put their eyes while they are feeling something too large to show directly. "He planned all of it," she said, quietly. Not with anger. Anger was too hot for what she was describing. This was something colder. The money, the signatures, the divorce agreement, the insurance policy. He had a plan for every version of how this could go. She set the mug down. Every version except the one where his own choices collapsed on top of him. "I thought about Preston standing in that garage doorway 2 nights ago, looking out at the street calculating. I thought about how long a person had to practice being someone else before it stopped feeling like practice." "Claire," I said. She looked at me. "You went back to Sandra 2 months ago," I said. "When it stopped feeling like nothing." A beat. Then something moved across her face, the ghost of something that was not quite a smile, but was in the same neighborhood. "The moment I photographed the first document," she said, "that same week." I nodded. I did not say anything else because there was nothing else to say. My daughter had seen the thing coming before I had. She had prepared before I thought to prepare. She had walked into that attorney's office 9 months ago and started building the exit she might need, and she had done it entirely alone without telling me, because she was the kind of person who solved problems before they finished becoming problems. Helen would have recognized that immediately. I recognized it now. Elias told me about LAX the following morning. He had heard it from a former FBI agent he had known for 20 years, a man named Carroll, who had retired to San Pedro, and occasionally came by the boatyard to drink bad coffee and talk about things neither of them was supposed to know. Carroll had gotten the details from someone still active in the field office, and by the time the story reached me, it had passed through enough hands to be stripped of anything official, but retained everything that mattered. Preston left the house in Pasadena at 7:15 Friday evening. He had packed 1 bag, a single carry-on, the kind of disciplined packing that suggested he had thought about this possibility long before Friday. He withdrew $50,000 in cash from a private banking account at a branch in San Marino that closed at 6. He had arrived at 5:47, which meant he had been moving since before the close of business, which meant he had known for hours that the walls were coming in. He drove to LAX in his own car, parked in the long-term structure at Terminal 4, paid cash for the parking ticket at the automated kiosk. Every one of those details, Elias told me, was noted by investigators afterward as evidence of a man who believed he was being careful. What it actually demonstrated, Carol had apparently said, was a man who had planned for contingencies but had not planned for the contingency where every contingency had already been anticipated. The no-fly order had been issued at 7:30 that evening, 90 minutes before Preston's flight was scheduled to depart. It had been requested by the FBI field office in Los Angeles and processed through TSA's secure flight program, which cross-checks passenger names against federal watch lists before boarding passes can be generated. Under normal circumstances, the process took several hours. The U.S. Attorney's Office had designated the Hale case as priority processing, which meant it took 40 minutes. Preston checked in at the terminal kiosk at 9 o'clock. The machine accepted his passport, confirmed his reservation, and then paused. The pause lasted approximately 4 seconds. Then the screen displayed a message instructing him to proceed to the staffed counter for assistance. Elias said that Carol had smiled when he described that 4-second pause. The machine already knew Carol said. Preston just didn't yet. He approached the counter. The agent behind it looked at her. Screen looked at his passport and looked at her screen again. Then she said something brief and picked up her telephone. 2 TSA officers arrived within 90 seconds. 2 FBI agents arrived 2 minutes after that, coming from the direction of the security checkpoint, where they had been waiting since 8:45. Preston was standing at gate 42B when it happened. He had made it through security. His boarding pass had been manually issued with a flag in the system, allowing him to pass through the checkpoint so that the arrest could be made past the public area, away from the main terminal crowds with less disruption. It was a standard protocol, clean, efficient. Elias said Carol described the moment with a particular detail that I found myself returning to afterward in the quiet way that certain details lodge in the mind and do not leave. Preston was dressed in a charcoal suit, tie in place, pocket square. The Rolex he wore at every family dinner we had ever shared was on his wrist. He was standing at the gate window, looking out at the tarmac when the agents approached, looking at the plane. Elias said like a man who had almost believed he was actually gonna get on it. One of the agents said his name. Preston turned, and in the moment before his expression shifted into whatever he decided to show them, Carol's contact had seen something cross his face that was not fear and was not surprise. It was the look, Carol said, of a man realizing that every calculation he had made was correct, except the one that mattered. They found the wedding photograph in his jacket pocket. Not in the carry-on, not in a wallet in the interior breast pocket of his suit jacket, the kind of pocket where men keep things they want close to them. A photograph from the wedding, 6 years ago, 4 inches by 6, slightly worn at the corners. Carol's contact had set it on the processing table during the search. Nobody had said anything about it. Elias told me all of this over coffee at the boatyard Saturday morning, while Claire was down at the dock watching the harbor traffic with a blanket around her shoulders and her phone in her hand, working through the list of calls she needed to make that day with the systematic focus of a woman rebuilding something from the foundation up. When Elias finished, I looked out the window at her. "She doing all right?" Elias asked. "She's making calls," I said. Elias nodded the way he nodded when something meant more than it appeared to mean, and he understood that and did not need it explained. I thought about Preston at that gate window looking at the plane. I thought about 6 years of Sunday dinners and the word Papa said in Helen's voice and the photograph worn at the corners from being carried close. I did not feel what I expected to feel. I had expected something like satisfaction or relief or the particular release that comes when something difficult is finally finished. What I felt instead was tired, deeply specifically tired, the kind that does not come from one bad day but from years of carrying something heavy and finally being allowed to set it down. I picked up my coffee. It was still hot. Outside, Claire laughed at something on the phone, a real laugh, short and unguarded, the kind that arrives before you remember to hold it back. It startled a gull off the dock railing. The gull complained loudly, adjusted its wings, and found somewhere else to be. Elias looked at me. I looked at him. Neither of us said anything, because there was nothing that needed saying. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday in mid-September. Claire brought it over that afternoon, driving up from her new apartment in Silver Lake. She had moved out of the Pasadena house the week before, taking 2 suitcases and a box of books, and leaving everything else for the dissolution attorneys to sort out. She set the envelope on my kitchen table without explanation, and sat down across from me and watched me look at it. No return address. My name on the front in careful block letters. The kind of handwriting that suggested someone who had taken their time and wanted to get it right. The postmark was from a federal processing facility in Victorville, California. I knew what Victorville meant. There was a federal correctional institution there, one of the larger ones in Southern California, the kind of facility where men went after the paperwork was finished and the sentences began. Claire's attorney had called me the previous week to explain the process. Ray Castillo had entered a guilty plea to 1 count of armed bank robbery under 18 U.S.C. Betrayal 113. He had cooperated, fully testified about Preston's instructions, confirmed the timeline of events, provided everything the federal prosecutor had asked for. The sentencing guidelines adjusted for his cooperation, and his lack of prior federal convictions had landed at 7 years in federal prison. Under the First Step Act of 2018, which allows incarcerated individuals to earn good conduct credits toward earlier release, he would be eligible for release after approximately 6 years, provided he maintained a clean institutional record. His daughter had undergone the cardiac surgery 6 weeks ago. A pediatric cardiologist at Children's Hospital Los Angeles had performed the procedure. The surgical costs had been covered through a combination of Medi-Cal emergency authorization and a charity fund administered by the hospital for cases that fell outside standard coverage parameters. She was recovering well. Claire had found that out and told me without editorializing. I had not asked how she found it out. Some things you accepted without examining the mechanism. I opened the envelope. The letter was 2 pages handwritten on plain white paper in the same careful block letters as the address. No salutation. It began directly the way a man begins something he has rehearsed and decided not to make longer than it needs to be. I read it once. Then I set it on the table and looked at the window for a while. The afternoon light was coming through at the angle. It only came through in September, lower, softer, the particular quality of California light when summer has technically ended, but the heat has not gotten the message yet. Then I picked it up and read it aloud to Claire. It said that he did not expect forgiveness and was not asking for it. It said that he had chosen me in that lobby because I looked like the path of least resistance, and that he understood now what that assessment had cost him in every direction. It said that he had been an Army Ranger for 6 years and had come home from 2 tours to a country that had not known what to do with him, and that this was not an excuse, only a fact he wanted me to have, because he thought I might be one of the few people who would understand what that particular kind of lost felt like without requiring him to explain it further. It said that his daughter's name was Ruby, that she was 8 years old, that she had her mother's eyes and his stubborn streak, and that she had made him a get-well card while she was in the hospital, recovering from her own surgery, which he had thought was the most Ruby thing she had ever done, and which had made him laugh for the first time in months. And then it said this in the last paragraph, in the same careful block letters as everything before it. I picked you because I thought you were the weakest person in that room. I was wrong about that in ways I'm still understanding. But I want you to know that being wrong about you is the only mistake I made that morning that I don't regret. Because if I had picked someone else, I don't think any of what needed to happen would have happened. I don't know if that makes any of this better. I don't think it does. I just thought you should know. I folded the letter, set it on the table. Claire had her hands pressed flat against the wood in front of her, the way she pressed them when she was holding something steady inside herself. Her eyes were bright, but her chin was not doing the thing it did. She had moved past that particular edge somewhere in the last 3 weeks. Ruby, she said. Ruby, I said. She looked at the letter on the table for a long moment. Then she said, "Do you want to write back?" I thought about it, genuinely thought about it, turning it over. The way I turned things over, quietly, completely, without rushing to the answer. "No," I said. "Why not?" I looked at the letter, at the careful block letters, at the 2 pages of a man saying exactly what he meant, and nothing more than what he meant, which was a harder thing to do than most people understood. "Because he already knows everything I would say," I said, "and I think he knew it before he wrote this." Claire considered that. Then she reached across the table and picked up the letter herself. She read it again from the beginning, slowly, her eyes moving down the page, with the focused attention she brought to everything she read. When she finished, she folded it the way I had folded it and set it back on the table. "I'm going to remember Ruby," she said, simply, like a decision. "So am I," said. Outside, the September afternoon continued doing what September afternoons did in Glendale, warm and golden, and unhurried the jacaranda trees along the street, beginning to drop the last of their purple blooms onto the sidewalk below, covering everything in a color that was almost too vivid to be real. I got up and put the letter in the drawer, where I kept the things that mattered beside Helen's grocery lists, beside Claire's first-grade drawings, beside the challenge coin that had started all of this, which sat there now, doing what objects do when they have outlasted their original purpose and found a new one. After Claire put her jacket back on to leave, I asked her to wait. She stopped in the doorway with her keys in her hand, reading my face the way she had always read my face carefully, without rushing the way you read something you know contains information you need and want to get exactly right. "There's something I want to show you," I said, "if you have another hour." She put her keys on the kitchen counter. I went to the bedroom and opened the closet and moved aside the 2 winter jackets that hung at the far end and crouched down my knee, sending its predictable complaint through my hip, and worked the combination on the small floor safe that had been bolted to the wall stud behind those jackets for 22 years. Helen had known the combination. After she passed, I had changed it to her birthday. I had not told anyone that. It was the kind of thing that did not need to be said. Inside the safe were the documents that mattered: the deed to the house insurance records, a copy of my will, the discharge papers I had never thrown away, and never looked at a photograph from a country I still could not name in any context where it might be overheard. And at the back, in a plain white envelope that had yellowed slightly at the corners from 9 years of sitting in the dark, a letter in Helen's handwriting. I brought it to the kitchen table. Claire was standing at the window, looking out at the jacaranda trees and the quiet street, her arms crossed loosely over her chest. She turned when she heard me come in. I set the envelope on the table between us. "Your mother wrote this 2 weeks before she passed," I said. "I've read it many times." I looked at the envelope rather than at Claire, because looking at the envelope was easier. I never showed it to you because to share it, I would have had to tell you things about myself that I was not ready to tell you. I paused. "I'm ready now. You already know most of it anyway." Claire sat down slowly. She looked at the envelope without touching it. "Does it say what I think it says?" she asked. "I don't know what you think it says," I said. "But probably yes." She reached out and picked it up. She turned it over in her hands the way she had turned the insurance documents and the financial filings and every other piece of paper that had come across her life in the last 3 weeks, with complete attention and no visible flinching. Then she held it out to me. "You read it," she said, out loud. My chest tightened in a way it had not tightened since the warehouse, different from the warehouse, softer and more complicated the way things are, when the danger is not to your body, but to something older and less easily defended. I took the letter out of the envelope. Helen's handwriting was the same as it had always been, precise, slightly forward-leaning, the kind of handwriting that looked like the person was always in a gentle hurry toward the next thing. She had written in black ink on plain white paper 3 pages front and back of the first 2 and about a third of the third. I cleared my throat. I began. She had written to me. First, the first 2 pages were addressed to me directly, and I will keep those between myself and her, the way some things should stay. But the final page began with Claire's name, and that is the part I read aloud. She had written, "Claire, if your father is reading this to you, it means he finally decided you were old enough to know him. He has always believed in protecting the people he loves by keeping things from them. He learned that somewhere I was never able to fully reach, and I spent 26 years loving him around the edges of it. I want you to know that the edges were enough, more than enough. But I also want you to know what he will not tell you himself, which is that the reason he watches every room he enters, the reason he always knows where the exits are, the reason he can be completely still in situations that make other people fall apart, it is not a habit or a quirk or something left over from fixing machines. It is who he is. It was who he was when I met him. And it is who he will be when you are reading this. Do not be afraid of it. It kept you safe when you did not know you needed keeping. I asked him once very early if he could put it away. Leave it somewhere we did not have to live with it. He tried. I watched him try for years. And then, one day I realized I had been asking the wrong question. The right question was not whether he could put it away. The right question was whether I trusted the man who carried it, and I did. Completely. So should you. I stopped reading. The kitchen was very quiet. The September light had shifted while I was reading later, now longer shadows the particular gold of a California afternoon that knows it is running out of time. Claire's face was doing several things at once. Her eyes were full and bright and spilling over at the outer corners, tears running straight down. In the way that happens when a person is not crying, so much as simply overflowing when the feeling is too large for the container and finds its own way out. Her hands were pressed flat on the table. Her chin was not doing the thing it did. She was completely still in the way that only people who are feeling very much can be completely still. She knew, Claire said. Her voice was rough at the edges and steady in the center. She knew everything. She always did, I said. My own voice had gone somewhere I was not entirely in control of. I set the letter down carefully, the way you set down things that matter. She was smarter than both of us. Claire pressed the back of her hand against her eyes. Then she dropped her hand and looked at me directly the way she had looked at me across work tables and kitchen tables and hospital waiting rooms, our whole lives straight and clear and completely without pretense. She said the edges were enough, Claire said. She said that, I said. Was she right? I thought about 26 years, about the parts of myself I had kept behind the safe door and the parts that had come home with me anyway, that had sat at dinner tables and coached soccer and driven to school recitals and held a small hand at a hospital when it mattered most. I thought about the man I had tried to be and the man I actually was, and the distance between those two things which Helen had known from the beginning and had decided was not the point. Yes, I said. She was right. Claire made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob, a short, unsteady exhale that had both things in it, the way grief and relief sometimes arrive together when you have been carrying something for a long time and finally put it down in the right place. Then she stood up and came around the table and hugged me the same way she had hugged me at the boatyard, hard without warning, with the full weight of everything the last 3 weeks had been. I held on. Outside, the jacaranda trees dropped their last purple blooms onto the sidewalk. The afternoon light held as long as it could. Then she pulled back and looked at me with red eyes and a face that was more open than I had seen it since she was very small, and she said, I have one more question. Go ahead, I said. Are you sorry? She asked. About any of it. The years you spent doing whatever it was you did, the parts you kept from me, the person you had to be before you became the person I know. She watched me carefully. Are you sorry? I looked at my hands on the table, the same hands that had untied a zip tie in a warehouse in Vernon 3 weeks ago, and held my daughter in a boatyard the same night, and now held a letter from a woman I had loved for 26 years and missed every day of the 9 since. No, I said. I'm not sorry. Why not? I looked up at her. Because all of it, I said, brought me here. 3 months later, on a Tuesday morning in late November, a federal judge in the Edward R. Roybal Courthouse in downtown Los Angeles sentenced Preston Hale to 22 years in federal prison. I was not there. I was in the backyard, and Glendale crouched over the lawnmower that had been broken since August, finally making the time to fix it. The morning was cool, genuinely cool, the way Southern California morning sometimes surprised you. In late November, the marine layer still sitting low over the hills, the air carrying the particular clean smell of a city that had rained the night before and was drying slowly in the pale morning light. Martha called at 10:47. I straightened up, wiped my hands on a shop rag, and answered. 22 years, she said. No preamble, no build-up. Martha had never been a woman who spent words on approach when she could go directly to the point. No possibility of early release, I asked. Federal system, she said. He'll serve at least 85%. The judge applied 2 enhancements, one for the identity theft, counts 1 for the scope and organization of the financial scheme. The prosecutor told me the guidelines calculation ran to over 30 years before the final number came down. A pause. Sandra Okafor was in the courtroom. She said he stood very straight when the sentence was read. Didn't react visibly. I thought about that. About Preston standing very straight in a charcoal suit with a pocket square, keeping his face composed, maintaining the appearance of control in the last situation, where appearance was the only thing left to him. Thank you for calling Martha, I said. Are you all right? She asked. The question caught me slightly off guard, the way genuine concern sometimes does when you are not expecting it. I looked at the lawnmower, at the backyard, at the persimmon tree in the far corner that Helen had planted the year Claire was born, and that still produced more fruit than one person could eat, the branches heavy and orange in the November light. I think so, I said. Yes. Good, she said. Last Thursday of the month is next week. I'll have the paperwork ready. I almost laughed. I'll be there. I finished fixing the lawnmower. It took another 40 minutes, a carburetor issue that should have been addressed in September, and would have been if September had not turned into the kind of month that rearranged priorities without asking permission. When the engine finally caught and ran clean, I stood there listening to it for a moment, the ordinary mechanical sound of a thing working the way it was supposed to work. Then I shut it off and went inside to wash my hands, and that was when I heard Claire's car in the driveway. She came through the back door, the way she always came through the back door, without knocking, because I had told her 20 years ago that she did not need to knock at this house, and she had taken that to heart. In the specific literal way, she took most things to heart. She was carrying a paper bag from the Thai place on Colorado Boulevard that we had been ordering from since she was in high school, and she set it on the kitchen table and started unpacking containers with the focused efficiency of a person who has decided that feeding someone is the correct response to the day. I heard, I said. I know you heard, she said. Martha texted me when she called you. She set 2 containers of Pad CU on the table and looked up. I figured you probably hadn't eaten. She was right. I had not eaten. We sat across from each other the way we always sat, and we ate, and for a while neither of us said anything that needed to be said, because the food was good and the kitchen was warm, and some silences between people who know each other well are not empty at all, but full of everything that does not require words. Then Claire set her fork down and looked at me. Can I ask you something? She said. You've never asked permission before, I said. The corner of her mouth moved, not quite a smile, but in the direction of one. I know. This one feels like it needs it. Go ahead, I said. She folded her hands on the table in front of her. She looked at them for a moment, then looked up at me. That morning, she said, at the bank, when that man grabbed you and put a gun to your head and used you to walk out the door. She paused. In that moment, not in the warehouse, not when you were calculating and planning, in that exact moment, were you scared? I set my own fork down. The question deserved a real answer, which meant it deserved time. I thought back to that lobby, the concussion of the gunshot, the hard grip on my collar, the cold barrel against my temple, the glass doors in front of me, and the people behind me, and the pigeon that had landed on the window across the street and immediately left, as if it had made a decision. Yes, I said. Claire blinked. I think she had expected a different answer. Genuinely, she said. Genuinely, I said. My heart rate went up. My hands wanted to do something before my mind had finished assessing whether doing something was correct. That is fear. The training does not remove it. It never removed it for me. I picked up my fork again, then set it back down. What the training gave me was the ability to let the fear be there without letting it be in charge. Those are different things. Claire looked at me for a long moment. Her eyes were doing the thing they did when she was processing something all the way down. Not just understanding it intellectually, but letting it settle into the places where it would actually live. Mom knew that too, she said. It was not a question. Your mother knew everything, I said, including several things I never told her, which I still cannot entirely explain. Claire picked up her fork. She took a bite. She chewed thoughtfully and looked out the kitchen window at the backyard, where the persimmon tree stood heavy with fruit in the November light. I filed for my own independent practice license 3 weeks ago, she said. The approval came through this morning. Sandra's going to let me use her office space while I build out the practice. Financial fraud and victim advocacy. We already have 3 potential clients. My chest did the thing it had been doing at various points throughout the last 3 months. That specific complicated tightening that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the particular kind of love that arrives when you watch someone you raised become fully and entirely themselves. Your mother, I said, and then I stopped because my voice had gone somewhere inconvenient and I needed a moment. Claire reached across the table and put her hand over mine. I know, she said. She would have cried. She would have cried and then immediately asked you about your billing structure, I said. Claire laughed. A real laugh, full and unguarded, the kind that arrived without permission and did not apologize for itself. It filled the kitchen the way laughter fills small spaces completely and without remainder. I laughed too. Outside, the November morning continued cool and clean and unhurried, the persimmon tree holding its fruit against the pale sky. The lawnmower sitting in the backyard finally fixed everything broken, now working everything that it needed, attended to more or less in the way that things in a life get attended to, imperfectly, belatedly, but in the end. Claire left around 3 o'clock. I walked her to her car, the way I had walked her to her car her whole life, all the way to the driver's door, waiting until the engine started watching, until she reached the end of the block and turned. Old habit. She had stopped telling me it was unnecessary somewhere around her 25th birthday. I had stopped pretending I would ever quit doing it somewhere around her 26th. The street was quiet after she turned the corner. The November afternoon had warmed slightly the marine layer, gone the sun finding its angle through the bare sycamores that lined the block, casting long shadows across the pavement in the particular way of late autumn light that always made me think of endings and of things that were not endings, but only looked like them from certain angles. I stood at the end of the driveway for a while. Then I went back inside, washed the lunch containers, and sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that I intended to drink while it was still hot, which was something I had been meaning to do reliably for about 9 years, and had not yet managed with any consistency. I thought about Preston standing straight in a federal courtroom, while a judge read 22 years into the record. I did not think about it with satisfaction, or with grief, or with any of the things I might have expected to feel. I thought about it the way you think about the end of a long construction project, the scaffolding finally coming down, the thing underneath revealed as whatever it actually was, the site cleared and ready for what came next. I thought about Castillo in Victorville, and about Ruby, 8 years old, with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn streak, making get-well cards in a hospital, while she herself was recovering. I hoped she was doing well in school. I found that I meant that without qualification. I thought about Martha, who would have the paperwork ready on the last Thursday of the month, the same as always, the same as it had been for 9 years, the same as it would be for however many years I had left to walk through that door. I thought about Helen, the persimmon tree in the backyard, the edges she had said were enough, the way she had been right about that, the way she had been right about most things, the way I was still 9 years on, discovering the specific dimensions of how right she had been. Outside, the light moved the way late afternoon. Light moves in November, slowly with the particular patience of something that knows it is almost done, but is not hurrying. I had been chosen that Thursday morning in August because I looked like the weakest person in the room. 67 years old, stiff knee, plain shirt. The kind of man you looked at and assessed and decided did not require much concern. Castillo had looked at me and seen an old man. Preston had looked at me and seen an obstacle he could manage. Both of them had been working from the same incomplete information, the information that was visible on the surface, the information that fit what they expected to find, when they looked at a retired man of a certain age with a stiff knee, and no particular reason to be remarkable. Neither of them had been wrong about what they saw. They had simply not looked far enough. I thought about something Helen had said once early in our marriage when I had come home from somewhere I could not name, looking like something I could not describe, and she had taken one look at me and made dinner and sat across the table and waited without asking until I was ready to be a person again. She had said the most important things about a person are almost never the things you can see from the outside. She had been talking about me. She had been talking about herself. She had been talking about everyone, really the way the best observations usually are. I picked up the coffee. It was still warm, not hot. Warm, which was when you thought about it about as much as you could reasonably ask of anything, that it still held some of what it started with, that it was still worth drinking, that it had not gone entirely cold while you were busy thinking about other things. I drank it. Then I got up, put the cup in the sink, and went outside to put the lawnmower away before the light failed entirely. Silas Rourke, 67 years old, retired, the wrong old man. There is a line I have carried since that August morning in Glendale, something I believe with everything I have left in me. Family betrayal does not announce itself. It arrives wearing the right clothes, saying the right words sitting at your dinner table for 6 years, and learning how to call you by the name your wife taught it. I am not a wise man. I made mistakes. I saw the warning signs in Preston and chose to look away because I did not want my daughter to hurt. If this family story teaches you anything, let it be this: do not do what I did. Do not protect the people you love by keeping your eyes closed. Love them with your eyes open, even when what you see is difficult. I believe, and I say this as a man who has stood in enough dark places to mean it, that God has a particular way of turning the worst mornings of our lives into the moments that matter most. That Thursday in August was supposed to erase me. Instead, it brought me back to my daughter. Family betrayal can break a home, but a family story built on honesty, even late, even imperfectly, can build something stronger in the wreckage. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment below and tell me what you think. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, now is a good time. Thank you for staying until the end. It means more than you know. The stories on this channel contain fictional elements created for the purpose of entertainment and reflection. If this kind of content is not for you, we completely understand. There is something on this channel for everyone, and we hope you find what you're looking for.